Banania. Nerds in Paradise. The constant sea breeze did little to temper the warm, heavy air, laden with an almost palpable scent of spices. And now it seemed to take forever before the first of the rubber boats, bouncing around on the waves, gently nudged the soft Caribbean sound. The rushing of surf masked the sound of the busy camouflage figures as they skillfully dragged the boat up to a secure place on the beach. The first of the watchers moved from her hiding position to help the passengers clamber out onto the reassuringly motionless beach. Then the other 4 watchers joined her in the almost total darkness as more rubber boats arrived. Someone had chosen this night well. There were not many moonless nights like this, so close to the equator. As he stumbled through the soft sand, hindered by the weight of his backpack, Nigel Nickleby, founder and lead engineer of DigiBeat, shook his head and rubbed his eyes, suspecting that the fatigue must be playing games with them. But as he peered harder into the darkness, he was sure. There were more than the 5 agreed people, helping carry their equipment and guiding his colleagues up the beach towards the house. Many more people. In fact, the beach now seemed to be crowded with people of all shapes and sizes, carrying, dragging, and generally just standing around enjoying the entertainment. Well, so much for security. It had been a fairly straightforward journey from Amsterdam to the small provincial airport in the south of the Netherlands and on to London's Stansted Airport. Then memories of the journey began to blur. There had been some delay after being transferred by unmarked van to an RAF airfield and becoming reunited once more with their equipment. But finally the team and their equipment were loaded onto a waiting C-130 military transport aircraft. After which followed interminable hours, sitting in a netting seat alongside their equipment, which was expertly strapped to the aircraft's floor. We could have brought Connor's big fancy car with us. There's certainly enough room, thought Nigel, as his engineer's brain spent the dull, rumbling hours working out how many vehicles, extra bicycles and coffee machines they could have taken along with them, and exactly how they would have packed them in. Well, the whole thing had all started at a meet-up in Amsterdam one evening some weeks before, as Nigel leaned against a bar tasting that month's speciality ale and complaining loudly to 2 friends. After another beer, Nigel was in mid-moan, rattling on about losing good people and to other start-ups and the impossibility of keeping secrets in such a tight group of peers. While mumbling appropriate excuses, Nigel's friends drifted away to talk with someone less depressing. But almost immediately, Nigel became aware of a man who just seemed to have appeared at his elbow out of nowhere and, more importantly, was ordering him another beer. Middle-aged, sharp-eyed, and out of place in this ragtag hipster community, Nigel had seen his type before. An investor. Well, a few words of sympathy for Nigel's dilemma, which he had obviously overheard, revealed an English accent. And that was how Nigel and Connor O'Connor, his co-founder and business partner, had found themselves in a small, nondescript pop-up office in Amsterdam's Jordaan district. But the anonymous Englishman was his significantly less furtive West Indian counterpart. Well, that meeting had been interesting, to say the least. In fact, for Nigel and his team, it was literally life-changing. But now, as he stumbled blindly up a very foreign beach, with the unseen hands of strangers guiding, supporting, and generally slapping him on the back, he began to suspect that they'd perhaps been a little too hasty in agreeing to uproot their whole operation. This seemed a little too far from the secure comfort of a repurposed school building just to the west of Amsterdam. To what? To where? It had all sounded like the breakthrough they'd always dreamed of, setting up a research facility, far from the prying eyes of competitors and the threat of losing their best people to the constantly lurking headhunters. Paradise, it had even been called. "Mr. Nickleby," called out a woman's voice from the darkness, "please be walking this way, please." Oh no, oh no, oh no. Oh, Nigel had seen this happen too often in so many crime movies, where the gullible victim gets whacked squarely on the head and wakes up in the next scene minus wallet, iPhone and possibly a kidney. But Nigel was now much too tired to care, so off he stumbled between some bushes toward the welcoming light of an open door. For some years, Nigel had been a fervent protector of industrial security, especially his fledgling company's security. In fact, he prided himself somewhat on being an active vigilante in the war against industrial espionage and generally pinching of good ideas. But even by his admittedly slightly paranoid standards, this whole operation, from the initial meeting with the two men in the anonymous Amsterdam office to his team's midnight arrival on this island by rubber boat, was all cloaked in remarkably efficient security. The impeccably dressed West Indian businessman, they were informed at their now dim and distant meeting so long ago, represented the development board of the Caribbean island of Banania. This was a small island nation that had recently applied for membership to CARICOM. That's the equivalent of a kind of Caribbean Economic Community. And apparently one of the prerequisites for becoming a full member of CARICOM was that Banania should have a thriving high-tech industry. Well, unfortunately, though they grew good coconuts, had some fisheries and were very proud of having almost constant internet access, something that could really be recognised as a technology industry was something the island sadly lacked. And so the government of Banania was willing to welcome their company, DigiBeat or DigiBeat or DodgyBeats, they weren't quite sure which, to have the honour of becoming that very self-same industry. High-tech luxury accommodation would be provided completely free of charge, as would appropriate transportation to the island. And finally, the government was so gracious as to offer them an undoubtedly most welcome taxation-free package. As marketing manager, Nigel's business partner, Connor O'Connor, was immediately impressed. Now at last, DigiBeat, attainable outdoors for the timid tech crowd. Creators of alternative gardening and horticultural equipment, with their unique and memorable "Think Different" and "Here's to the lazy ones" slogans, had found a recognition he had longingly sought after for so long. The one minor stipulation to the CARICOM contract, that the company operate and live on the island concurrently for at least 6 months, seemed completely reasonable. In conclusion, the anonymous Englishman felt that it behoved him to explain that there was perhaps a very minor, minuscule and completely insignificant issue of euphonia. Banania's slightly belligerent neighbours. The slightly misguided euphonians had taken upon themselves to become sworn opponents of all things British, including nations like Banania, which were friendly toward the Crown. Which was why Her Majesty's services were happy to assist in transporting Nigel and his whole team and equipment to Banania. For their part, the Bananian government had formed a select committee of reliable, patriotic and honest citizens who would assist them in setting up and establishing their business in Banania. These thoughts persisted in rolling around in Nigel's weary head as he approached the open doorway, but they immediately scattered into oblivion, and an overwhelmed Nigel stopped dead in his tracks. With eyes and, admittedly, mouth wide open, Nigel stared into the eyes of the most beautiful vision he'd ever seen. "Good evening, Mr. Nickleby. I'm so sorry for the long journey that you've had. I do hope it was at least bearable. My name is Lily Dobson, and I believe that I am to be your own personal secretary. Welcome to Banania, sir. Welcome home." And that night, as Nigel slid gratefully into blissful oblivion, all he could think of was that someone who mattered to him had actually called him Sir. Well, maybe Banania was not such a big mistake after all. That was Banania. Please subscribe via Apple Podcasts or your favourite podcast provider. And for more information, visit bananiapodcast.com.